As time moves forward, as technology changes and grows, as the infrastructure of companies continue to ebb and flow, one thing remains the same. A leader has to produce. This is the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast, a transformational leadership approach that's centered around three core concepts: vulnerability, transparency, and authenticity. On this show, you'll learn how to be open and honest with yourself and with others, while also developing trust, empathy, and respect within your team. You'll learn how to empower them to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities. This is the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast. And now your host, Edward E. Mosley Jr.
Some really great nuggets. Our guest today is Boris Zhukov. He's the CEO of Let You Know Incorporated. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Boris, introduce yourself and give us your perspective on leadership. What does that mean?
Well, thank you for this warm introduction. So pretty much, Ben, I think you already said that I had the company that's called Let You Know. So this is a next generation marketplace. And that's exactly where we empower people to get deals on their terms. So you want to buy something, you bid, instant results. That means you got it on your own terms. So there is a lot of science behind it, a lot of tech that had to be put in place behind it as well. And a lot of patents, because like I said, it's based on science. I myself, I came from an academic background. I used to teach at Ball State University back in my pre-Let You Know days. So it gives me a broader perspective, I guess. Plus, since I had to deal with a lot of students, you get to experience a lot of takes, right? And you not necessarily like educate people from a perspective as kind of instruct them what to do, but you guide them in that journey. That helps a lot whenever you get into a company and you have to lead a company. Especially as we scale, and the whole agenda is for us to scale globally, not just nationwide. So as far as the leadership is concerned, I can give you my definition. Again, it's going to be different than the definition that somebody else is going to give you, but my definition encompasses a couple key variables, such as there got to be a product behind a person who is actually pitching it, okay? So that's got to be compelling. Second, you got to have that inner belief in the product that person is pitching. And finally, the ability to be an effective, and I'm talking about effective speaker, to have that passion to articulate the why behind the product or innovation that makes people say, aha, I want to be a part of that change, right? So that's pretty big, because as you get excited talking about it, and if there is reciprocity and you see other people engaged and you see those eyes all lit up, that changes your perspective. And to me, that becomes a true leadership in a way that a lot more people are bought into the system. Right now, they understand what's at stake, why we are doing it, and why they want to be part of that so-called movement, right? And at the end of the day, nobody wants to be sold. They want to kind of lead their life or be a part of something on their own terms. So if you can accommodate that desire and materialize that into the real world situation, that becomes almost like a no-brainer for anybody, right? And to me, encompassing and integrating those aspects, or like I said, variables into leadership, that's what constitutes leadership. So at the end of the day, you just got to move those people. You got to move not just people around you, but also your customers, as well as anybody who may actually be listening to you. So that's, I guess, in a nutshell, that's my take on the leadership itself.
You know, that's actually a good point. It reminds me of a song. I cannot remember the rapper who sung it, but it basically was an old rapper. He said, you got to move the crowd. I get that point. You have to be passionate about and believe what you're doing, It
Exactly.
has to basically like just show your vision, your 100% commitment to it. But you made a statement that um you have to make them want to be a part of that change.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
hard for people. That is hard for leaders because it goes into storytelling. You have to be able to show them how what you're doing can change their lives, and then they're able to sell it, believe it, just as great as you. Talk about that. That's hard.
Well, that is true, and that's why there are people like, for instance, Elon Musk or Steve Jobs and a lot other people, right? I mean, talking about even sports, like let's say Michael Jordan. A lot of people think, well, he's great, he's great, he's great, but he actually was able to band a lot of different teammates around him as well, right? And he had the whole crowd behind him. They were all bought into that one cohesive unit, right? One apparatus, so to speak, right? And that's, that that's a daunting task to accomplish. But if you are able to achieve something like that, well, that's exactly what, constitutes a great leadership. And as far as like, let's say, talking about Elon Musk or somebody else or Steve Jobs, I think the key is that, like I said, one of the things that I mentioned above was that you got to have a compelling product or the idea or concept to innovation behind it as well. You cannot have something that you don't even care about, right? It got to be something that you truly believe going to change the world, and then you are communicating why. And there was the TED talk by I forgot who was the speaker, but the whole idea was Simon Sinek, and
I thought that's what he was going to say.
yeah,
Yep.
and right, and he was talking about like why, right? Like and we're not talking about like, let's say, where different products and their features and so on and so on. So he's saying like the effective way how to make people buy into what you are pitching is to make them feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves, right? It's not just like, let's say, listing, you have this feature and that feature and that feature and this feature and this product is reliable or whatnot, but actually make them, feel like this is something that all of a sudden that they are part of, like a movement, like some kind of like this aura that they associate themselves, with. And that product becomes an extension of themselves, right? And if you're able to achieve something like that, all of a sudden people are going to love it, not even because of all these, features and all these different innovations, but because they can relate to it, And I think that's the key. You got to find those points, right? Those tangency, elements where you can say, hey, look, this is why. And, so maybe it's a little bit of a cliche that I actually kind of like invoke that example with the Sinek, but that conversation that he had, it just kind of like stuck in my head that why, it does make sense. I mean, like you go to Starbucks not because it's a great coffee, but because you almost like feel you're part of the crowd, right? Like, you know what I mean? And that's what some products are successful, I believe, because of that.
Yeah, I do believe that too, and I see it as well. And I want to ask you a question. So most people, most leaders, they really don't I don't want to say it that way. Do you think most leaders only look at the staff or the task directly in front of them? What I'm asking is, you want to make a change globally. A lot of leaders, a lot of mid-level supervisors, C-suite folks may not think globally. So is your leadership style and your vision to think globally, is that, you think that's too big for some people? Are they limiting themselves based on their capability?
Well, there are different, different places or different tasks for different times, so to speak. So initially, you gotta make people motivated. So that's the key. That's where the global thinking comes in, right? But then whenever you work on a particular problem, that goes out of the door. You have to focus on what's at hand. So that means that if you're trying to solve with a group of people, like let's say you're debugging a certain, like, let's say, issue that came up, and you're trying to solve it to make the consumer experience to be seamless and eliminate some of those bugs, well, then you have to focus on that. The broad picture is great. They are motivated, but now we're here and we got to solve it. At that point, it becomes more like localized, in nature. You have to be able to pick your spots in a way, So yes, there is a time to motivate people. Yes, there is a time to actually talk globally, but there is also a time where you have to be more kind of like, I don't want to say narrow in your focus, but you have to almost like be laser focused on a particular problem, okay, that you're trying to solve as well. And then here's the key. At that particular scenario, the difference between a great leader and maybe not a great, someone who maybe, I don't want to call inferior, but not as, or subpar, I guess, would be a better word, to someone who is great. The difference would be someone who is great will be able to know the weaknesses and strengths of which person on their team, and then they will play it in such a way that it will maximize the overall benefit. And everybody, see, another key is it's not just being motivated by, let's say, this global result, but also imagine that somebody appreciates you for you being able to be that kind of like a problem solver for that particular, little niche problem, but they are now delegated all the responsibilities to fix it, what they are really good at. And that recognition also actually, makes people feel good, right? Because they know that they're being accountable for that, but at the same time, they're being trusted to solve something like that. And now they recognize that this person actually knows I'm good at it, and I'm solving it because I am good at it. And people feel typically good whenever they can solve certain things, right? And a great leader will recognize that, and they will assign all these different tasks and make this team, which is diverse, right, yet move as one oil machine, like a cohesive element, right? And that's also another key that differentiates someone who is actually great from someone who is going to be subpar to that level. Because subpar would be like stubborn, right? I mean, that person would just go, headstrong, right? This got to be done this way. This person got to do it regardless whether they actually suited for, like, let's say, solving a particular, let's say, little issue or not. They're just going to, disregard all of that. And that's going to be a big shortfall as far as the team is concerned, to be able to be effective at solving, given tasks. But if you have a team and you recognize those strengths and those weaknesses, and you play on those, to make your team better, well, here we go. It becomes, incredible. Think about this. I mean, for instance, we had not exactly a year ago. I mean, I think it was, this summer we had the World Cup, soccer World Cup, right? And Messi and his team, Argentina, they won it, right? They had a lot of attempts where they failed at getting the World Cup, right? But the key difference is that I noticed this time around is that Messi recognized, it's almost like that experience, right? That it gave him patience, where all of a sudden he recognized that certain people on his team are really good at certain little things, maybe, that can all of a sudden complement his performance, right? Then just him driving the whole team forward all the time, right? And then he kind of started to delegate these responsibilities in a way that may not seem to be noticeable, like if you just look at one particular play, but if you look at this grand orchestra of things, all of a sudden you see the difference. And you see the difference from, let's say, 2014, 2018, when those guys failed at accomplishing the same objective that they were able to accomplish this time around, And to me, I believe that sort of foresight, that patience, it's not just about globally motivating your team that we are the best, we're going to be the best, and we are changing the world because everybody going to be looking at us. Little kids going to be looking at us, and they're going to be, motivated and inspired. But also you recognize that it's a grind. There are these little matches, and sometimes they don't go necessarily your way, but how do you fix it, right? In that, I'm talking about at that local scale, right? How do you fix certain problems? And then all of a sudden you recognize that there are a lot of other people on your team who can actually do a lot of things. And it's not just you, but it's maybe you as a leader who can actually guide these people to do the best job they can in a way that makes the whole team a much better, cohesive unit than it would have otherwise. And I think that becomes a game changer, right?
I think you're right, because what I think you're saying is a leader has to be able to see everybody's strengths and weaknesses. They have to be able to articulate and make it in a way where if employee A can only do this piece, then make them feel as though their piece is valuable.
Yes.
And if you can make that piece feel valuable, then the next person is waiting to see how their piece affects the next piece. And I think that's key. I think if instead of isolating the conversation and having small little conversations, I think that gets more into team dynamics. And, we talking about leadership when it comes to an individual basis, but now you put a team dynamic in it.
Yes.
And leaders have issues in team dynamics. So they rather operate in silos rather than bringing everybody together. Because, Boris, how many times have you heard or seen where Department A doesn't know what Department B is doing or what Department C is doing? That's crazy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're independent in a way that there is no communication and everybody just, doing some kind of ad hoc, approach to solving problems. And then at the end of the day, if you don't integrate it in a way that it's productive for the entire organization rather than just Department A or B, well, things will start falling apart. And the issue is once they start falling apart, it's not, a team dynamic anymore. It becomes this sort of like, blame chasing expedition.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that becomes counterproductive. Like the key is you as a leader, you should definitely avoid something like that, because then you're just going to be spending time on something that's completely unrelated to what everybody at the end of the day want to accomplish, So absolutely, I think you nailed that one.
I think the other part of that, and I want to ask your opinion on this, is when you get to that blaming piece and that no integration piece, it seems from what I have seen, it all goes back to HR, and HR didn't hire the right person. Rather than saying, looking at the bigger picture, they always want to blame it back to the hiring of that particular person.
Well, that is true. That's because, again, you got to blame somebody, right? And that's a sign of a weak leadership, right? And not just weak leadership, of a weak team. And it's also a fault of everybody in that team as well, because at the end of the day, they all fail together. It's not just one person or the leader or everybody who are part of that team. They're all blaming and trying to find a reason why it's failing, right? And again, it's not a constructive way to look at the problem. It's not a way of saying, hey, we need to get to the bottom of it, so we prevent it. It's more like, well, it's just a problem of a hiring process. We didn't get the right person. We didn't get that. Yeah. But, to me, at the end of the day, you saw a person who is being brought on a team as well. So that means that responsibility is going to be shared. If you're just going to think logically, right? That responsibility will be shared not just with HR, but everybody else on that team. So I think at the end of the day, what you should do is you should not really fall back on that. You should be focusing on how to really solve the problem. And so if you can say, look, maybe that person, happened to be falling short of what I thought initially this person should be assigned to, well, maybe you need to realign some of that assignment and just work with whatever you have to fix the situation the best way you can. Because again, any distractions are going to be counterproductive. Any of those conversations that whose fault it is, it's going to be counterproductive, and it will not move the needle one bit, at solving anything. You see what I mean? I mean, it's like going back to Michael Jordan example. Imagine that Michael Jordan said, well, that person shouldn't be part of my team. That guy, the defense shouldn't be here. That guy, shouldn't be assisting me. Scottie Pippen shouldn't be there. I mean, the point is, you can go on and on and on to say why. There are always, by the way, let me tell you about excuses. There are so many excuses that you can always fall back on them. It's no problem, right? To find why something is not working. The key is how to actually make with what you have, how to actually accomplish the goal with what you have is what's going to be the difference maker. And I believe that's the key. So at that point, instead of playing that game, which is counterproductive, doesn't go anywhere, you just say, okay, so here's what we have. Let's solve it. It kind of reminds me when I was a little kid, the expectations were pretty high in terms of academic, I guess, accomplishments or whatnot because of the education of my parents and grandparents and so on and so on. But one solace that I found was, like, let's say when I was failing at something, my mom, for instance, instead of blaming me, right, or my grandpa, instead of blaming me and saying, oh, you're worthless, you're not getting it, you're not working hard, they're kind of saying, hey, let's regroup. And it may not work out, but you know what? We're going to have a plan how to actually make it work tomorrow. And then it almost like makes you feel hopeful, right? Like tomorrow, okay, like, and it doesn't have to be tomorrow. It's not like an extension, okay, of the workload, okay, from today to tomorrow. The point is there is a game plan, how we're going to all of a sudden achieve the result, that we failed today, but it's going to be okay tomorrow. And if someone can actually do something like that, well, that's great. You say that's exactly what needs to be done. And then once it gives you hope, right? So then instead of beating down someone or beating down yourself, you actually kind of feel pumped up, and you want to accomplish that. The key is you feel like other people start trusting you and you don't want to let them down, and it's like that feeling that makes you motivated, to accomplish something now instead of just thinking like why something cannot be done. And at least in my circumstances, it helped me tremendously, So, and I feel like a lot of times within, like, let's say, work environment, whenever you have a team, sure, you can find a way, like, let's say, to blame somebody and come up with an excuse why something is not working right. But it's actually far more constructive and better for everybody to find a way how to actually pull it off. And let's be honest, I mean, none of us, there is not a single person who knows every single thing, right? We're all of us are good at certain things, right? So that means that collectively we still know something that other people don't. And if we now exploit, right, those strengths, well, some miracles may happen, because of that.
So do you think that, for instance, you said science and tech background, and so very structured when it comes to coding and things of that nature.
Sure.
Do you think in your environment you want that new idea vice if you were in a more structured environment where maybe it's dealing with money or numbers? Do you think those leadership styles or the ability to allow your employees to think and integrate and be thought thinkers and strategic thinking, do you think the field of study or the business will dictate how the leader leads?
Well, I can tell you based on my experience, here is what works best. Instead of actually considering yourself, okay, to be a leader all the time, what we have is different people specialize in different things. So, for instance, we have a legal person, we have, like, let's say, administrative person. So she would be the chief, let's say, administrative officer. And whenever it comes to those type of matters, her voice trumps all of us. It doesn't really matter. She becomes the expert. And it makes no difference what I think because she knows better. And, there is this latitude or flexibility that she has, right, to do what needs to be done based on her terms, right? And then when she feels that she's trusted and she's responsible and, of course, accountable for the results, she performs really well. So instead of me, okay, instilling this metric where it has to be structured or whatnot based on, like, let's say, some programming or mathematics or whatnot that I relate to, well, the approach is different. And then it becomes not exactly me just telling everybody what to do, but other people would actually tell me to assist and essentially what to do in those fields, right, where it falls outside of my scope of, like, let's say, expertise, right? And so I think that's actually is a better way to conduct leadership, right? So you almost like not exactly delegate, but you have different people with different set of expertise and skills that become leaders, in those areas. And to me, that's a lot better because they know actually better what to do than me forcing my way I can listen, but I still don't know exactly how it needs to be done in a field that is completely unrelated to me, right? So, and I think that degree of flexibility got to be there, where a lot of other people may actually become leaders under those circumstances in those fields that fall outside of mine, So that's how I approach things. Now, when it comes again to let's say matching and mathematics, and some business partnerships, et cetera, I may take a leading role, and I will be the one who will be dictating the pace. But again, you have to recognize who's good at certain things, and you just gotta, maximize, right, that particular return on their skill, So that's my take, So great question.
So over time, do you think your leadership style has changed, or have you always been this type?
Well, that's a great question. So I believe it changed for a couple main reasons. Okay, it didn't change because I want to say it changed, but because over time I got exposed to many different people, to many different ideas, to many different personalities. And I'm talking about actually working with many different people and teams, it kind of makes you recognize there is this element, okay, or there is this virtue of patience. And I don't think you kind of get that right away. It takes time for you to acquire that kind of virtue, or I guess skill. Maybe it is actually a skill. And once you become patient, the key difference is when you become patient, you become almost like understanding at what works and what can work. Like, for instance, let me give you a quick example. It's self-explanatory that different things click with different people, right? But you see that simple truth evades us at the moment when you're trying hard to drive a certain point, right? You're trying to accomplish something. In that moment, you kind of lose the perception of it, right? But if you have that patience, if you have that experience, all of a sudden you may actually step back and say, hold on a second, you know what? It is true that while I expect other people, to get whatever I'm trying to explain to them to solve this one giant problem, but there are infinitely many roads that many different people will take to solving the same problem. Yeah. And then you try different angles, and that's patience. You try different angles and you try different approaches. And then at some point you become, like when I say you become patient, you also become better at reading the situation, at reading people a lot better than before. And at some point you see those eyes all lit up because whatever you just presented them, a new angle, it clicked. And that's memorable. Now you're cooking. Now you're actually solving something. So I believe over time, what happened to me is I got that experience to be patient, to be a lot more patient than before. And now I understand that, it is true that people click with different things. And I actually expect it from the get-go, and that allows me, given that this is my expectation now, it allows me to try different approaches, not get let's say, discouraged to keep pounding one way of explanation, but trying different routes, how to actually get something solved, So that's, I guess, how over time my skills evolved, So something like that was definitely a game changer.
Yeah. So what would be one or two strategies that you would give an aspiring leader or somebody currently in a leadership position that they're struggling on how to, how did you say it? How to bring them on, how to build that, be that visionary leader. What would you tell them?
Well, you gotta have fundamentals, okay? So still, when I say fundamentals, I'm talking about you gotta work uber hard, okay? So that goes without saying. You still have to do all of that, okay? It's not gonna be like some kind of miracle recipe where all of a sudden, bam, things just gonna fall in the right place. But, okay, given that you work hard, okay, my opinion, you gotta have those fallback activities, okay? It may sound strange, but here's what I mean. There gotta be like this something, okay, that allows you to detox or like kind of like regroup and mentally, okay, like clear your mind. There got to be some activities that allow you to do that. And let me demonstrate, okay? For instance, okay, I like to run or cycle. There are other activities that I like. And sometimes whenever you get into a challenging situation, you are solving some stumble block, and it seems like there is no solution inside. I just go and, like, let's say, clear my mind, okay? And I'm not even actively thinking about this, but it's kind of funny because some kind of miracle happens when I clear my mind. I don't even think about it, but my neurons somewhere on the back, in my cortex, are probably still firing, trying to figure out solution without me actively thinking about it. And by the time I'm done running my 7 miles or whatnot, all of a sudden, sometimes the solution presents itself. And then I go back 10 times better than before, completely refreshed, and can all of a sudden, solve something with my team that was previously maybe not, I don't want to say impossible, but we were just burning tires, trying to figure out how to get something done. So the key is you got to work hard, but you got to be able to sort of have something that will allow you to regroup, to clear your mind. That's the key, so that's something. And in fact, it's not just like, let's say, in work situations and in different leadership circumstances that may be working, perfectly, but also even, like, let's say, in my academic, previous, like, let's say, years, I remember, like, you're taking the exam, but right before the exam, I would be, let's say, going to school or driving to school or whatnot, and I would think about nothing. You see what I mean? Like, absolutely nothing. Just have my mind completely clear all of that, purge all of that out, right? And somehow when I get to the classroom, I was focused, like refreshed, and it's almost like I knew what to do, And I feel like you got to have something like that. It's not exactly a strategy, but to me it is. and I feel like you gotta have that fallback activity that allows you to clear your mind. That's the key, just to sort of like reset it, and
I get it. So my fallback activity is I like to golf. And so, to your exact point, I could be struggling with an idea or a direction or something, and I could just go and play 9 holes, and all of a sudden I'm on the tee box or I'm walking to the green, and all of a sudden I'm down there putting or something, and all of a sudden, there it is right there. And I have to automatically take my phone and record it or something because it's in my head. It's there. Yeah.
Human brain is very powerful. Think about stuff that we actually came up over the history, right? It's unbelievable. I mean, and the capacity, right, to process this information that becomes more and more involved, right, as we actually march forward in time, right? It's just mind-boggling, and the potential of human brain is unbelievable, Like I said, think about this from the moment, like when we used to be Australopithecus back like on the east coast of Africa to now, right, all over the world, how much we achieved as human race, right? It's unbelievable, right? And that's because the brain is like a miracle organ, right? And you got to give it a chance sometimes to reset it and do its magic,
You're right on point with that, because I've noticed, and this is just a routine that I do. So for the most part, I'm pretty much up by about that 5 a.m. time frame. What I have noticed is if I were to sleep to, say, for instance, 7:30, I don't get as much accomplished as I did when I got up at 5 o'clock. I could get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. My brain is firing, it's fresh. I'm not thinking about a whole lot of stuff. I've kind of left yesterday, and I'm on task. I'm on point. But when I lay in the bed to 7:30 or just be kind of lazy, my mind has so much on it. It's just going all over the place, and you almost don't get anything accomplished. So I completely understand your analogy of the brain, and because I have the ability to say, okay, we're thinking about nothing. Just clear it. We're not thinking about text messages. We're not thinking about social media. We're not thinking anything. Just clear your mind and don't think about anything. And it works.
Yes.
It works.
Absolutely, precisely. And see, by the way, I mean, this is unrelated to the subject, but there is circadian rhythm in terms of sleep, right? You're actually one of those 30% of people who are early risers, whose cycle actually falls earlier. And if you switch your cycle a little bit, that's exactly how you said it. You're not going to be as productive. Now, there are some
Yeah.
people who are actually late, and it's not because one cycle dominates. It goes into your DNA, goes into those chromosomes, etc. And there are about 30% who are more productive, like late. There are some people who are like in the middle. It's very interesting, actually. And if you know your cycle, I'm talking about that exact cycle that works for you. That's what you got to stick to, because that's exactly what's going to make your brain fully detoxed. And when I say detoxed, I'm talking about like when you sleep, you're going through those cycles, right? Like REM sleep and rapid eye and things like that and other things. And what happens is during those times, okay, your brain is firing those waves and getting rid of some of those proteins. Like I think there is like DAL protein, some other protein that it just like washes out, right? And the key is if you time it where it's really effective for you as a person, that's the key. You got to stick to it, and you're going to be super productive. Like you said, you don't even think about anything, and somehow the brain does the magic.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% believe that the element of change is all psychological. It is in the brain. And that's when I like talking about me as a person, as a coach, as a leader, finding my ideal self and what works for me. And understanding, I tell people all the time, hey, we can be associates, but you may be doing some things that doesn't align with my thinking or my process. And that's okay. We can be great, we can have coffee together, whatever. But you don't have to be included in my inner circle. Sure. And that's a stress that I like. You know what? I always say I cut the fat. You just got to cut those pieces away from your life that's not productive for you, because I want to add value to you.
Right.
And I want you to add value to me. And that's how I operate.
That's a great way. Well said. Well said. Yeah.
Well, Boris, it's been a great show. Tell the listening audience just one bit of piece of nugget that they just need to have.
Well, here's what I'm going to say, okay? Sometimes circumstances or situations may look to be daunting, desperate at times, right? The key, okay, is to never give up. Just keep on pushing and keep on working hard. And then when you're going to look back, you're going to realize that you've accomplished a lot more than you originally anticipated. And that's that magic. It's just that hard work going to push you all the way to the land that you thought was completely uncharted. And, if anything, that from what I said, going to resonate with somebody is that hard work, okay, and maybe that patience, right? And that extra activity to clear your mind, okay, coupled with that resilience will get the job done. Just have faith in that. Have faith in you. And it's going to be marvelous in terms of what can be accomplished.
I love it. Hey, I've had a great show with you today.
No, you're the man.
No. Every person that I've kind of talked to, I try to find little bits and pieces that just make them unique. And I believe the conversation we had today is an important conversation, but it all goes back to faith and believing. But you brought up a point about knowing when your brain is firing the most. And yes, that's your cycle. It's not mine. And I have to, as a leader, I have to understand that you may be an early thinker. You may be a late thinker. And I have to allow that. I have to allow it. It's Absolutely. Not a cookie cutter 9 to 5. I have to allow that to fire when you're firing. Yeah.
100%. 100%. Yes.
Well, hey, again, thank you for being on the show. I hope the audience loved it, because I definitely did. And as I always say, hey, peace.
Peace. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership podcast. Edward E. Mosley Jr. has 30 years of leadership experience and is an ICF credentialed leadership coach. And it's his passion to inspire leaders who can foster a safe space where they can empower their followers to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities while sparking collaboration and creativity. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But until then, find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edward E. Mosley Jr. To contact the show, send your emails to limitlessboundsteam@gmail.com. See you next time on the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast.